Hello, and welcome back to another Sunday school lesson. This lesson is, we're still in the Book of Mormon. It's 1 Nephi 11 through 15, and it's titled, Armed with Righteousness and with the Power of God. So, if you'll remember from the last lesson, Lehi had a vision of the Tree of Life. Now, just speaking for myself personally, this is one of those visions, the symbolism of, and just the imagery has stuck with me since, I was a kid. I was taught this as a kid, and I think, that in that regard, it's one of the more memorable, visually impressive, pick whatever words you want on it. But it's one of the more memorable, one of the more visually impressive visions, I think, from scriptures. Just simply because, as a young, it's my own biases here, but as a young child, it really stuck with me. And so it was a really great vision, but as often happens with, visions and things like that, we don't always understand what's going on with them. Many of them have very layered symbolism, whereas we understand bits and pieces as it goes on. Well, Nephi was a young man at this time, and even though he would become a prophet, even though he was pretty much a prophet at this point as well, he didn't quite understand what the vision meant. So he did, I think, really, took the best course out there, which was he prayed and asked God, what is this all about? And as he was praying, as it says in the scriptures, he was caught up in the Spirit and started to be shown kind of a vision of his own. And included in this vision is the interpretation of his father's vision. So there's a lot of interesting stuff to cover. So the first thing that they start to talk about, the first he sees an angel, and the angel brings him to a high mountain, starts to show him all of these parts of the vision. And his first question is, do you know the condescension of God? And Nephi's response is actually a really good response. He says, I know he loves all his children, but I don't know all things. And so the angel starts to show him a vision of Christ, of the upcoming Messiah, which this is about 600 BC. So it's before Nephi is before Christ's time, I should say. Sometimes hard to phrase that. Anyway, he's shown all these visions of the Messiah, of all these things, and really Nephi begins to understand that the tree of life actually symbolized the love of God. And when we eat the fruit of the tree, we're eating the fruit of, or the, fruit sounds a little weird in modern parlance, doesn't it? It's the, what comes of God's love, essentially. Maybe fruit is better. Regardless, that's what that symbolism meant and is about, and that was the first thing that Nephi is shown on his vision, is this, is Christ. And I think that's one of the things that that really speaks to the Book of Mormon, because it testifies of Christ so often, even many hundreds of years before he came, it testifies of the divinity of Christ and of his mission, and really the love that God had for us by sending Christ. And it's really exceptional. So Nephi, I'm actually going to read straight from the book here, because there's a list of what Nephi saw. A ton of stuff, just a lot of stuff is listed in these verses where it is, and most of the stuff he saw wouldn't happen in his lifetime, or even remotely close to his lifetime. Some of them were things that would happen thousands of years later. And so, the question that's kind of asked is, why was Nephi shown this? Why would it have been of value to him then? And I think, ultimately, we need to kind of, first and foremost, Nephi was commanded to write this vision down, and so we saw so a lot of it was written down and then translated, and we have it now. So it wasn't of immediate value to Nephi, but it was of later value to us. So there's always a purpose behind it, even if it's not immediately clear to us, and even if we don't fully understand it. Sometimes the stuff that we're commanded to do isn't for ourselves, but it's for other people that we may never know or meet or see, and that's the purpose behind a commandment. And we have to, have the faith that it all makes sense. It's all going to be worth it for whatever reason that we are doing this. And that was a good part of Nephi's vision. Were these things that were to happen. So, just as a quick note of what he saw the future of his own people. He saw the colonization of the Americas, the American Revolution, the Great Apostasy, and the restoration of the gospel. So he saw a lot, and he saw even more than that. We'll get into that a little bit as in the different subjects, but he saw a lot of stuff that, really, I think, would mean a lot later on to his descendants, would mean a lot to the Americas. And I think it shows and reveals just how special and what a great place the American continent really is. What a blessed place it is. I was going to say nation, but it's not just America. It's the entire American continent. It's such a just a miraculous, wonderful place. So, and he saw all that, and it just amazes me. So, one of the things that comes up that that's mentioned in his vision is the creation of what he called a great and abominable church. Now, he basically says there are only two churches: the Church of God and the Great and Abominable Church. And so a lot of people have questions like, wait, what does this mean? What's he talking about? Why, is it, is it good? Is it bad? And basically it's been said about modern prophets have looked at it and said, it's not a specific church. It is any ideology, any person, group, ideology, religion that opposes the Lord. That's all it is. It's basically, put into simpler terms, it's basically good and evil. And yeah, it's really that simple. So, and I've always found that interesting, because I think eventually we are actually going to have to choose between God or the world. And part of that is kind of the a last days type thing where, final battle and stuff like that, very dramatic apocalypse and Book of Revelation stuff. But it's also, I think, down to us personally. We either choose between the world or between God. Well, we choose between God or the world. I could have phrased that better. And what we do with that is down to us. Are we going to be part of the world, or are we going to be with God? And I think it is an important question that we all face. And the scriptures are what help us understand all of that. So, now, there's another interesting point here, is that Nephi basically sees a person, and the Spirit manifests with that person, and that person goes across the waters, sails across the many waters, and makes many discoveries. So, what we know is that the person he's talking about was actually Christopher Columbus. And basically, Book of Mormon says Christopher Columbus was inspired of God when he went out and discovered these many things. And it includes, now the lesson, this is something I've never come across before. The lesson includes this great quote from Columbus, which I'd never even heard before. And I'll just go ahead and read this quote here. He said, "These great and marvelous results are not to be attributed to any merit of mine. For that which the unaided intellect of man could not compass, the Spirit of God has granted to human exertions, for God is wont to hear the prayers of his servants who love his precepts, even to the performance of apparent impossibilities." So, yeah, Columbus was inspired of God to come forth, discover the Americas. And it really is as simple as that. I mean, so much of this lesson at least feels at least to me like just very simple, very plain, precious truths that somehow we have lost or forgotten in this day and age. And I think it's very important that we remember them and, yeah, apply them into our lives. So, Nephi also saw in his visions that the writing a record of the Jews would have many plain and precious truths removed from it, and that's referring to the Bible. And throughout its many different translations, many different interpretations, a lot of the plain and simple truths that were originally contained in the Bible have been lost. And most scriptorians I know of pretty much agree with this. They, regardless whether they're members of the church or not. The church is Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I have to say it every single Sunday school lesson at least once. But yeah, most of them say, yeah, things changed depending on the translation of the Bible. And so the whole point, one of the purposes of the Book of Mormon, in addition to testifying of Christ, was to establish the truth of the Bible. Since the Bible had been, a lot of the truths have been lost, a lot of the interpretations, translations of it have led people away from God and not towards God. The Book of Mormon would then is there to establish the truth of the Bible. It's there to say, okay, if it's in the Bible and then it's in the Book of Mormon, okay, that's what we're supposed to be doing. And that's essentially what Nephi saw. He saw the coming forth of the Book of Mormon would come forth, and that the Bible would be, the truthfulness that is still in the Bible would be established by the Book of Mormon. And it leads men away from their own interpretations and their own wisdoms and back towards God's wisdom in establishing the truthfulness of the Book of Mormon. So it's yeah. That's what it's there for. So one of the things this lesson ends on, and I find this interesting because I discussed this a lot last week too. So in my experience, if someone inspired of God repeats something, whether it's repeated again in the Bible or in the Book of Mormon or by modern day prophets, then it bears listening to. Then God really wants you to know this. So this is being repeated, which was that if you ask the Lord something in faith with a soft heart, the Lord will answer. And it's down to personal revelation. It's down to humbling ourselves enough to ask and having the patience to actually listen for an answer from God. And it's not always easy. We don't always get the answers in what we would consider to be a timely manner. But they always come in the Lord's time and ultimately in the best time for ourselves. And that really is probably one of the most important lessons we can get out of this. Is that if you don't feel like God is listening to you, you don't feel like God is answering you, have faith and keep asking. And this is an important point about the lesson. And I'll kind of explain. So after Nephi saw his vision of all these incredible things, also he saw this huge vision, and he discovered that his brothers were arguing over what the dream of their father meant. And Nephi's first question to them is, "Well, did you pray? Did you ask God?" And the response was, "God doesn't give us any answers. He doesn't tell us these things." And Nephi asked, "Well, how? Well, why aren't you obeying his commandments?" And and that's what it's meant by having faith and a soft heart. Are we soft-hearted enough to obey God's commandments? Are we humble enough to obey his commandments and then pray and ask in complete and utter faith? You can't just defy God's commandments constantly and then expect him to give you an answer, the second you want an answer from him, or the second you want a miracle, or the second you want anything from God. You can't just suddenly show up and say, okay, can give it to me, and expect to get an answer. You have to be constantly working. You have to be constantly obeying the commandments and having faith in God, in the good times as well as the bad times. It's just one of those things that you really, really have to do. So many people kind of leave it. They get so encumbered by the things of this world, by all the fun stuff in the world, that they leave God behind, and then suddenly bad stuff happens to them, and then they want everything they can get from God, and it doesn't work that way. We can't be fair weather friends to God. We have to be there throughout the entire process. We have to put forth the effort and put forth the work. And if we do that, and then God will respond to us. He will answer our prayers. Not immediately, not when we want it, but when he feels it is best. And anyway, I think that's a pretty good place to end the lesson. I will add, just as a point of interest in the lesson, that one of the things that Nephi saw in his vision but was forbidden to write, because it was not his responsibility to write it, was the same revelation that John recorded in the book of Revelations. But Nephi says it was not his place to write that vision, but that it was John's place. So, anyway, that is the lesson. Let me know what you think. Like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.